I would like you to conduct some light trail experiments. I'd like you to experiment to learn how shutter speeds correlate with the length of the light trails. I want you to record the data, the information about your shutter speeds, which ones you used, and how long your light trails were for each shutter speed. I want you to report on what you learned and apply what you learned to capture an entire word drawn with light. When I did this experiment, I had some givens, some things that stayed the same throughout my experiment. I used a Canon Rebel camera set on a tripod. If you don't have a Canon Rebel camera, that's fine. You can use whatever camera you have. If you don't have a tripod, you can set your camera on a stable surface. I was able to set my camera to shutter priority mode, or TV, so that I could change the shutter speeds. And when I did that, it set my ISO, or film sensitivity, to 100 and my f-stop, or aperture, to 4.5. Those stayed the same throughout the whole experiment. I turned off my flash and I set my automatic timer to 10 seconds. The light I used was a green finger light, and I was about 8 to 10 feet away from the camera. And each time I took a picture, I drew in a circular motion in the air. Before I started, on a piece of paper, I wrote down all of the shutter speeds that my camera has. And I went from 1/4000th of a second to 30 seconds. And as you can see, my camera had a ton of shutter speeds. Then I started taking pictures, one picture at each shutter speed, and again I drew in the air in a circular motion. And this is what I came up with. So at 1/4000th of a second, you can see a tiny dot, 1/3200th of a second. I'm going to keep going. And as I keep going, you're going to notice that my dot grows. And each time I click, now I'm going to 1/160th of a second, to 1/125th of a second. My seconds are getting longer and longer. And now you can see a little dash at 1/40th of a second. And we see about a quarter of a line, or a quarter of a circle at 1/10. About 0.3 seconds, you can see about almost a half a circle. 0.8 seconds, you can see a whole circle. And at 1 second, you can see a whole circle with a little bit extra. Again, my seconds are getting longer. You can see more circles. To 8 seconds, 10 seconds, I kept drawing and drawing and drawing. 20 seconds, I kept drawing and drawing and drawing. 25 seconds, 30 seconds. That aperture was open for 30 seconds, or that shutter, excuse me, was open for 30 seconds. So I had 30 seconds to draw in the air, and this is what I got. So here's where I recorded my data. It's not the neatest thing, but it's just where I got my information. And as you can see, I wrote down all of the shutter speeds. And I had to assign numbers to the length of my light trails. And I was like, what should I do? Well, I thought, you know what? I'm going to look at the light trails and assign like a number for how long they'd be. So what I did was, if there was nothing, I would have given it a 0. If I saw just a dot, I assigned the light trail a 1. If it was 1/8 of a circle or a dash, I assigned it a 2. If it was about a quarter of a circle, I assigned it a 3. If it was a half a circle, it got a 4. 3/4 of a circle got a 5. A full circle got a 6. 2 circles got a 7. 3 to 4 circles got an 8. 5 to 7 circles got a 9, and 8 to 15 circles got a 10, and 16 plus circles got 11. I basically estimated what I saw based on those photographs. Then what I did was, on a piece of graph paper, and this is what I want you to do as well, I want you to graph your information. Now I'm going to go back a couple places here. Back on my lined paper here, you can see where I assigned the shutter speeds numbers. And these numbers here are the length of my light trails that I noticed in the photographs. So obviously 1/4000th of a second was just a dot. 1/8 of a second was about 3/4 of a circle. Let's see, what's 5? Oh, excuse me. Um, let's see, anything with a 6 was a whole circle. Let's see, at 5 seconds, if my shutter speed was open for 5 seconds, it looks like I was able to draw 5 to 7 circles. So this is where I recorded all that information. Then what I want you to do on a piece of graph paper, I want you to make a y-axis and an x-axis. And along the x-axis, I want you to write down all your shutter speeds. And on your y-axis, I want you to write down the numbers you assign to the length of your light trails, from 0 to whatever number you picked. And then what I want you to do is put dots where those things correlate. So at 1/4000th of a second, remember I assigned my light trail a 1 because it was a dot. So I put a 1 there. I put a dot there. And I kept going and going and going. And I just put this information here for more information so that I wouldn't forget. And from this information here, I can see where my light trails start to grow, at what shutter speeds my light trails start to grow. So it looks from here at like 1.6 of a second, or 1.6 seconds, it looks like I could start doing some simple designs. And about 10 seconds looks like where I can start actually writing things in the air. So from this data, I could write down information that I learned from my data, and I would like you to do the same. So after you're done with your experiment, I want you to tell me, after what shutter speed did your light trails begin to grow? They went from a dot to a line. I'd like to know at what shutter speed did the light trail streak across the view or create a full circle. And I'd like to know what shutter speed allowed you to write an entire word with the light trail. So then you can keep experimenting. These are the things that I discovered based on my graph and my information. And then what I did was I applied my new knowledge and I drew a word in the air. Actually, I had plenty of time. I used different color lights and I drew a word and I drew some pictures, and this was my final project, my final picture.